Is this Jags roster set up for Lawrence to take that next step next season?
I think it really is, Laura. And I know that probably sounds like the refrain we had last offseason, especially building off of that playoff momentum they had. They make the miracle comeback against the Chargers. They take the Chiefs all the way to the mat at Arrowhead, weren't able to overcome the eventual Super Bowl champs that season. Laura, there's all kinds of adjustments that we can talk about during halftime of a football game. And during the offseason, we've got a full 6 or 7 months worth of adjustments. The Jaguars' biggest adjustment this year is play better. If you look at this roster, where's the major deficiency on the offensive side of the ball? They made legitimate investments in the offensive line.
Yep.
Their wide receiver group was good on paper going into the draft, even with the departure of Calvin Ridley in free agency. And they took Brian Thomas Jr. Evan Ingram had the second most catches in a single season by any tight end ever. Like, there's a lot of pieces in place for Trevor Lawrence. Last year, though, between blown protection, drops, and just unforced mental errors, I felt like this team left so many offensive plays on the table.
And to your point, Field, there are so many weapons. One of those weapons I want to focus on is the name you just mentioned, in Evan Ingram. And the reason why is this. Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl winning coach, won a Super Bowl in Philly. And how did he do it? He focused on his tight end. Zach Ertz led that team. Tight end Zach Ertz led that team in receptions and receiving yards. Last year, what did Evan Ingram do? Not only did he lead his team in receptions, but also he led the NFL amongst tight ends in receptions and receiving yards. He was actually 4th out of all people who can catch balls, tight ends, receivers, running backs, you name it, when it comes to receptions. And so Evan Ingram has to be a focus for this offense. And I think even going back to that Super Bowl year back in 2017 with Philadelphia, it wasn't only Zach Ertz, it was also Trey Burton had 5 touchdowns, top on the team as well. So those pieces, the tight end focus is going to be critical and crucial for Jacksonville to get where they want to go.
Yeah, Evan Ingram would tell you, too, he's remade his career in a lot of ways, putting in so much extra effort into what he would become. We saw that play out on the field. Graz, of course, the big thing hanging over that offense is the contract status of Lawrence. What can you tell us about where things stand there?
They'd like to get something done before the start of the season, so that really gives them 3 more months, which should be plenty of time. The two sides have had conversations throughout the offseason, and I think when Jared Goff's contract came in a couple of weeks ago, I think that kind of probably set expectations in some way in terms of where this thing will eventually land, but they have to work out guarantees and structure and when the guarantees are paid and all that. Yes, the Jaguars would have liked to play better last year. They would have liked everyone, including Trevor Lawrence, to play better last year, but they feel like they've seen enough from him over his time in the NFL that they feel confident moving forward with him as their franchise quarterback, especially when you factor in that he doesn't even turn 25 years old until October.
Yeah, Graz, I feel like I've seen enough from Trevor Lawrence to believe that a quarterback contract extension is going to eventually take place in Jacksonville. And Laura, we do this all the time with teams that are kind of teetering, right? Yeah. We're not talking about when the Chiefs reinvest in Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson gets that contract last offseason. We're talking about teams kind of on the edge of that quarterback spot. Miami, Jacksonville, 2, I think, notable examples in the AFC right now. It's the opportunity cost. If you don't want to extend Trevor Lawrence, you want to do the dance that the Ravens just had to do with Lamar Jackson or what the Vikings and Commanders before that had to do with Kirk Cousins. It's a dangerous game in the world of quarterback contracts. Beyond that, get used to this idea. $50+ million per year for your starting quarterback is going to be the norm. And at some point, believe it or not, it's going to be more like middle of the market. That's the landscape we are now in the NFL.
You think about Dak Prescott's contract that's going to have to get done. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. Graz has an update on where all of that stands and kind of who could get a deal done first there for the Cowboys. But let's continue on with the Jaguars. They were the clear-cut favorite to win the South heading into last season, but that's not the case this year. Jacksonville has just a 23% chance to win the South, according to ESPN Analytics. The Texans make sense. They're the favorite at 51%. The Colts are right there with the Jags at 21%. So let's talk about the Colts here for a minute. Second-year quarterback Anthony Richardson only played in 4 games before that season-ending shoulder injury. Graz, Richardson had been a full participant in the offseason program until last week, and then he sat out in the final practice. People got a little worried, but what can you tell us about that decision?
Yeah, the Colts are saying that it really isn't anything to worry about. Yes, he felt a little soreness in the shoulder, as you might expect for someone coming off of an injury like that. But it was the final practice of their offseason. It was shortened to about 40-45 minutes, and they didn't really feel like Anthony Richardson missing it would be that big a deal. They believe he'll be a full participant when they open training camp, that he's checked every box in his rehab so far, and they're excited about his progress in his return from the shoulder injury. And Laura, again, again, they don't have any more practices till training camp, so we really can't do much but take their word for it. If he shows up in late July and he's not on the practice field, then we'll know something is wrong. But so far, the Colts are saying that it's not.
Yeah, for now, it was a sigh of relief for Colts fans. And really those of us that just want to see more from Richardson on the field. I'm excited to see Field, assuming he's healthy. What are your expectations for him in the fall?
The sky is the limit for this player, Laura.
Agree.
The question is, how quickly can he reach the sky? And for a player that had 13 career college starts, what's the old adage? The only way to get better at playing football is to play football, right? So I do feel like more so than maybe any other young quarterback amongst non-rookies in the NFL, training camp is going to matter to Anthony Richardson this season. He's this big, huge, I should say, ball of clay, right?
Yeah.
Last season, he played 12 quarters, though. Now he's dealing with this shoulder injury that, even if it's not a concern right now, is something for us to monitor. The ability to impact the game in multiple ways makes Anthony Richardson potentially the next Josh Allen type player in the NFL. But until he has the chance, just like to create muscle memory as a thrower and being that much more precise, he is going to be not a mystery, but a player that we're going to be wondering how many more levels there are to his game.
And we're excited to see those levels, but it's not just the level on the ground. You talk about reaching the sky and the sky being the limit and reaching your potential. He can do it through the air as well. We get so excited about Anthony Richardson's legs, and rightfully so. You see what he did in college at Florida, even early on in the NFL. He was outstanding with his legs, but I want to focus on his throwing ability as well, right? He targeted Michael Pittman a ton. Michael Pittman was top 5 in receptions last year for a reason. Even though Anthony Richardson didn't play, that piece is back. You have Adonai Mitchell, who you drafted out of Texas in the second round, ran a 4.3 40 as well. He's on that team. And so now all of a sudden, Jim Bob Cooter, who used to coach in Detroit, all of a sudden he gets a chance to have his hands on Anthony Richardson for a full season. I can't wait to see what it does with his arm, not just his athletic ability.
We'll continue our LA theme as Harbaugh front and center as part of some major change in LA. The Michigan coach moving back to the NFL after winning the national title in January and signing a 5-year, $80 million deal. Now, LA had some serious cap issues, so they traded Keenan Allen, released Mike Williams, chose not to sign Austin Eckler, and restructured Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack's contracts. The Chargers had a good draft, taking tackle Joe Alt, 5th overall, trading up to draft wide receiver Ladd McConkey, and drafting linebacker Junior Colson out of Michigan, who Harbaugh was familiar with, in the 3rd round. Chargers wideout Josh Palmer talked about the new approach in L.A.
I'd say the biggest difference is there's a large emphasis on the details. Extreme emphasis on the details, more than any team I've been a part of, from college to high school to anything. It's the most detailed-oriented emphasis I've ever been a part of. So I would say that's the biggest difference. It's blaring. Like, you can't miss it if you're in a building with us.
Sounds like Harbaugh. Let's bring Dan Graziano back in here. Graz, the Chargers paid Justin Herbert last offseason, but this seems like an offense built to run the ball. Should we expect that when it comes to what we'll see on the field?
I think at the beginning, yes. I mean, look, they drafted offensive line high in the 1st round. They did take a receiver in the 2nd, but the receiving group's unproven. Yeah, I mean, Josh Palmer's entering his 4th NFL season, so he should be ready to take a step forward. He's been behind the depth chart, behind Mike Williams and Keenan Allen on the depth chart his whole career. No longer the case. Quentin Johnston was a 1st-round pick a year ago. Chargers have high hopes for him, and of course, Ladd McConkey, who they drafted in the 2nd round this year. So it's a receiver group that has potential. But right now, I would say the expectation people have about the Chargers offense is it probably leans more toward the run game while that passing game sorts itself out in terms of roles and what those guys are able to do.
Yeah, there's nothing to sort out, Dan Graziano. This is going to be a run-first football team, period. And the reason I say that is this. I go back to offensive coordinator Greg Roman, who was with Jim Harbaugh when he was the head coach in San Francisco from 2011 to 2014, was also with him with the Stanford as well. But I played against those teams year in and year out, and they were run first, run heavy. They went and they got Dobbins in the offseason. They went and traded away all their receivers. They went and drafted Joe Alt, an offensive tackle, not a quarterback, not a receiver, first in their 1st round pick. And so they will be a run first team. We just talked about Blake Corum at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh was his coach. They ran, let me put my Coach Prime on, run the darn ball. They're running the darn football. That's what they're going to do. And so it's not about like finding a receiver and finding a fit. No, this is going to be a physical, run the ball down your throat football team. It's who Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman have always been.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, as both of you have said, at least at the beginning of the season, kind of the MO of the Chargers. I will note this, though. Hard to run the football if you're not playing with the lead, and they play in the division that has the best team in professional sports right now, the Kansas City Chiefs. Moreover, while Jim Harbaugh has played a certain way at both the pro and college level, I'm not sure he's ever had a quarterback as gifted of a thrower as he has right now in Justin Herbert. I don't think you put $52 million a year into a guy and then say, hey, let's put the Lambo in the garage for the season. And while I know Ravens fans will be incredibly frustrated to have to reminisce about some of the passing game concepts they had under Greg Roman, it is worth noting that Lamar Jackson, who of course is the greatest running quarterback of all time, also had a 36 passing touchdown season, the first time he was named the NFL's MVP, in which he led the NFL in passing touchdowns. So I keep thinking about this. On paper, this feels like a team that is going to regress in terms of its passing game proficiency. And yet when you have Justin Herbert, kind of anything is possible, because at the very best of Justin Herbert, Laura, we have seen a player who, I know he needs more wins, but his brightest moments are in that top 5 to 7 quarterback in the entire NFL.
Yeah, you feel like he's just been scratching on the surface of what he can complete in the NFL, and maybe we'll see more of that this year.